Good morning, everyone. We will now begin the morning bell chant. I invite you to read along or chant along with us. We'll be reciting the invocation of the names of the Bodhisattvas. Should be a handout in your handbook. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering and the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Kushitagarbha. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth, and we will help transform the hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability so that, like the earth, we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. We invoke your name, Saraparibhuta. We aspire to learn your way of looking deeply with the eyes of non-discrimination in order to see the true qualities of others. Whenever you meet anyone, you bow respectfully and say in appreciation, I respect you deeply. You are a future Buddha. We vow to look deeply into ourselves, to recognize the positive qualities that are there, to accept and to love ourselves. We vow only to water positive seeds in ourselves and in those around us. By doing so, our thoughts, words, and deeds will give rise to self-confidence and acceptance of ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and all those we know. We vow to look deeply with the eyes of non-discrimination to see that the joy and success of the other person is also our joy and success. We vow to behave and to speak with humility and respect. We vow to practice loving speech to help people who underestimate themselves see that they are wonders of the universe. We know that only when we are able to transcend the barriers of a separate self shall we be able to transform the superiority, inferiority, and equality complexes and realize true happiness and freedom. Thanks, everyone. We will now maintain noble silence.
Sorry for everybody on YouTube. Let's see. All right. So I will ask everybody to please stand and we will greet each other with bows. Next, we will do some chanting, starting at page 7. I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand the living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, and that I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. Turn to the next page. Of great compassion, from the deep practice of prajna, paramita, perceived the emptiness of all 5 skandhas, and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. No form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind. No realm of sight, no realm of consciousness. No ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance. No old age and death. no extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. Bodhisattva, holds on to nothing but prajna, paramita. Therefore the mind is clear of any elusive hindrance. Without hindrance there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All goods of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna, paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna, paramita, is the great Dharma, the radiant peerless mantram, the utmost supreme mantram, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna, paramita. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisattva. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisattva. Prajna, paramita, Vedaya, Sutra.
Right. All right. I think some people knew I was on a retreat for the last couple of weeks. So I decided to talk about it. People seemed like they'd be interested in what was going on. So this title is called Zen on Retreat. Simple enough. In ancient times, when a monk went on a Zen pilgrimage, they'd strap on a straw hat, put on their 3 robes, socks, sandals, a belt, their rakusu, and an alms bowl, and that was it. They'd go by foot from one side of the country to the other, searching for the true Dharma, for the true teaching. They were called unsui, which is cloud and water, because they drifted across the land like clouds and gathered at the foot of their teachers like pooling water. And we're still called unsui. But nowadays we set off in cars or taxis, Ubers, we fly over the face of the earth in airplanes, get all turned around in airports, and finally arrive at our destinations, which we now often call Zen centers. And what is it exactly that we're hoping to find at the end of the journey? It's the truth.
And that's not necessarily some abstract truth that's out there, separate from ourselves, but it's a truth that's in here. As Buddhists, we often say that there is no self, no Atman, nothing in us that always stays the same, that we're always changing. And if that's true, then we should be able to discover something new about ourselves in every single moment, since we're always bending and shaping and forming in response to whatever situation we find ourselves in, like water falling from the sky that shapes itself to the earth. This truth, though, is available to us everywhere. We don't need to leave home to find it, since we carry it around with us or as us. But if, like a musician, you really want to hone your craft, you really have to leave home to travel to a conservatory to dive headfirst into a life completely devoted to music 24/7. And the same is true for meditators as well. So all of this is background in a roundabout theoretical way to how I found myself at Green Gulch Farm, which is part of the San Francisco Zen Center for a 2-week guest student stay. Now, I've lived my life in a way that I wouldn't have to have, or that I don't have very many obligations in my life right now. I don't own much of anything. My car was paid off in cash a few years ago. I don't have a significant other, and my son graduated from high school this last year. So I set off to test the waters to see if the Zen Center might be a place that I could move to and train for a few years before returning to Grand Rapids and bringing with me everything that I learned. So what was it we were actually doing out there on the farm? So, like, what draws us to a period of retreat in the Zen tradition? And the easiest way to describe what was going on is just to give you the layout of a typical day. So we were located in a large hall, maybe 20 of us or so, guest students like myself and long-term residents. I shared a room with another guest, AJ, who will probably be watching this one day. So hello, AJ. Our day began at 4:45 a.m. And if you're like me, you're already awake somehow, just listening to hear the first strike on the han, which is like a smallish little wooden board that's struck with a mallet. Now, this sound tells the morning bell ringer to start their rounds. So they literally race around the entire hall, the bottom floor and the top floor, ringing their bell outside of your door. So it's like a ding a ding a ding a ding a ding a ding a ding. After they made their one round, to make a second round just to be sure. So it'd be very hard for someone to sleep in at a Zen monastery or a Zen center. Between the morning bell and the start of Zazen, or seated meditation, at 5:20 a.m., you have 35 minutes. So, although you're supposed to show up to Zazen at 5:12, otherwise you'll be shut out. The doors will be closed, and you will have to wait a while before you're let back in. I typically spent my 27 minutes brushing my teeth, putting on my robes, and then quietly talking with my roommate. And you have to be very quiet, since the doors are very thin, and the hall outside is also very, very quiet, besides the bell ringing. This speaks to the idea that the entire center, the entire farm, is an extension of the Zendo, of the meditation hall. We'd often walk around in shashu, like this, which is a meditative pose, and we would bring our attention to what was directly in front of us. As well, many of the indoor spaces are no-shoe zones. So in the Zendo, we're often barefoot. And add silence into the equation, and you find yourself having a very different relationship with your feet. Whereas, when you're in shoes, you just tend to stomp around without too much thought. And bare feet on a creaky, hard wood, you find yourself moving with a more like a deft step, almost cat-like. So now we're finally entering the meditation hall, the Zendo. And once you're at your seat and you're well-adjusted posture-wise, you continue to be struck by just how quiet it is. Nobody's making any sounds, and nobody's moving. And this is one difference between like my own home practice and traditional Japanese practice. Once you're on your mat and in your position, you don't move, not even to scratch your nose or to shift a foot that's fallen asleep. Now, No one says you can't move. But basically, when no one else is moving in a perfectly silent zendo, you tend not to move either. Now, this is disregarding the frog chorus or the frog choir that would ebb and flow outside of the zendo walls, like throughout the meditation period, from just absolute silence to a cacophony of frogs about in every 10 minutes. It's like thunderous amounts of frogs. Now, you don't have to sit motionless for the entire 60-minute period. At the midpoint, another bell rings, and you're able to either stand up or to adjust your sitting posture, try to make your foot not be asleep anymore. And then finally, after that, the full 60 minutes of sitting, a taiko drum, one of those big, big drums, starts to get hit, and a bunch of other little tiny bells go like ding, will call you out of your zazen and up onto your feet to begin a Soto Zen style chanting service, where we often chant in Japanese, do prostrations. I was 12 or 15. I can't exactly remember how many, but many prostrations. And also sometimes chanting while bowing, which was kind of cool because you could feel the reverberations of the chanting coming up through the floor and into your body as you're doing your bows. Afterwards, we'd all line up in the hall at 6:50 a.m. and receive our soji assignments, our temple cleaning assignments. This could be anything from cleaning the toilets to sweeping the zendo or sprucing up the laundry room. Just something very simple since you only have 15 minutes to do it. Right around 7:10, the breakfast bell rings and you can mosey on down to the dining hall. I'd heard rumors that they did a breakfast chant every morning, but I was always late, so I never actually heard it. And the food is very, very good. Vegetarian with vegan options, so I ate vegan the entire time, except for the very first night when I accidentally ate a piece of cheese pizza. I'm lactose intolerant, and my stomach turned into a symphony during that first evening Zazen period where everything was absolutely silent. Just like praying for the frogs to start back up every now and then. Yeah, it was wild. Now, breakfast is silent, so no talking, no cell phones, no distractions, but simply just eating, which is another way that we bring the zendo out from the meditation hall and into our life there. Typically, between breakfast and the start of study hall, you have about a half an hour to relax. And then at 8 o'clock, everyone would go outside to the main hall, find a place to sit at the tables, and recite a sutra verse together and sit for 40 minutes while studying. And I often would go down to the temple library and study there because I loved to be around the books. And it was had just about every volume you could possibly find on Dogen, the founder of the school that I teach in. So after study hall, we had 5 minutes to report to our work period. And for guest students, the work mainly consisted of putting away leftover food, washing the dishes, and cleaning up the dining area, which tended to be quite a task. It would take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. Then you get a 15-minute break and have to report to the second part of the work period. Sometimes we'd get to help out on the farm by weeding the garden, or we go to the saunas and clean them up, stuff like that. Now, work in Soto Zen is very important, and everyone has to work. Even the abbot and the senior staff take turns helping to wash the dishes in the kitchen. Then we have another short break before lunch, which starts at 12:30. Lunch was only silent for the first 10 minutes. And typically there'd be more time to relax again after lunch before the start of the 1:30 work period, which would be very similar to the morning work period with the dishes, putting away food, cleaning the dining room, then a short break, and then either more cleaning or off to the farm again. An interesting thing I found about weeding on the farm is kind of how it directly feeds into Zen teaching. I know a lot of people garden, but I'm not one of them. I don't have particularly green thumb, but at a Zen monastery or Zen center, gardening was one of the most important tasks, since that's how the monks and nuns would feed themselves. So we'd often find ourselves pulling weeds and saving flowers, which points to one of Dogen's most famous phrases from the Genjo Koan, actualizing the fundamental point, which goes, "Therefore flowers fall even though we love them, and weeds grow even though we dislike them," which is his poetic way of characterizing samsara. So I found myself kind of living out this Zen teaching right there on the farm. At 3:30, the work period comes to an end, and we didn't have anything to do until 6 p.m., which is dinner time. We'd often walk down to the ocean, which is about 30 minutes away, or go hiking in the hills around the center, or I'd slip back down to the library for more reading, or just hang out, relax, take a nap, whatever. Around 6 p.m., you'd find yourself waiting for the dinner bell to ring, telling everyone that the dining hall was open. Now, it's very odd to find myself waiting for this bell that's so ubiquitous in Zen writing. Even in one of my last talks about Daishan, bowls in hand, when Zen master Daishan went down to the kitchen before the dinner bell had rung and ended up being insulted by his student Zhui Feng. Now, like a dinner bell might not really seem like that big of a deal, but it's a real struggle. One evening, no one rang the dinner bell, so I found myself lying in bed, wondering if I really should go down to the dining hall or not. And just it turned out that they forgot. So by the time I went down there, the dinner had already been served for a while. So now, just like with lunch, dinner is also silent for the first 10 minutes, and then it tends to be pretty boisterous afterwards. After dinner, you're free again until 7:40 when the evening service begins. But just like with the morning service, you want to get there 8 minutes early. Otherwise, you'll be shut out again. It did happen to me once, so I keep reiterating. If you're ever there, get there early if they tell you to. The evening service is quite short, about 10 minutes, and then we sit another 40 minutes of Zazen. Service ends at 8:30, and by 8:40, the hall is completely empty and completely silent, and the lights are out. So you want to be to bed by 9 or so. You have to get up again at 4:45 sharp the following morning when the bell ringers run around again to wake everybody up. That's pretty much it. Mondays were half days, and Tuesdays we had off completely. Now, I'll put a caveat on this, that this is actually the easy schedule at the farm. As I was leaving, everybody was getting geared up for an upcoming practice period where they get up a little bit earlier, 4:30, I believe, and sit 3 hours of Zazen a day. And there's also a sesshin, where you sit pretty much all day long for about a week or so. And then there are also something called an ango, which is a summer and winter training periods that last 3 months. And in that 3 months is a sesshin, so a week of sitting at the beginning and a week of sitting at the end, and sometimes also a week of sitting in the middle of it. So that's the most rigorous training that you can get at a Zen monastery. Now, one of the most striking aspects of the stay there was like the perception of time. Dogen Zenji, the founder of the Soto school of Mahayana Buddhism, as I mentioned before, the founder of the school that I teach in, once wrote, "Even though you don't measure the hours of the days as long or short, far or near, you still call it 24 hours. Because the signs of time's coming and going are obvious, people don't doubt it. They don't doubt that an hour or a minute really exists. Although they don't doubt it, they don't understand it." Now, what Dogen is saying is that since we can look at a clock and see that it's 10:30, or we can look at it later and see that it's now 2 p.m., that we think we understand what time is and how it affects our lives. But a number on a clock isn't time. And although the farm was very regimented, it's hard to pin down how time flows there. It was hard to remember what day it was or how long I'd been there. The 2 days felt like a week, and a week felt like a month, and 2 weeks just kind of felt timeless almost. Elsewhere, Dogen writes, "The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world." What might seem even more familiar to us than the 24 hours of the day is our own self. But when we step out of the familiarity of our own lives, suddenly we feel like strangers. What we thought we were turns out to just be all of these old familiar events and situations that we typically find ourselves in. And what we think of as ourself just turns out to be familiarity. Every day at 1 p.m., I go into work. Every day at 10 p.m., I leave work. That's who I am. That's myself. And at the farm, that got all twisted up and turned around. Like, where am I? Like, am I Shinkyu? Am I Brian? It was all very strange. Dogen also writes that time itself is being, and all being is time. We tend to think of ourselves as these little unchanging kernels, but What we really are is time. We're like these little whirlpools in a great stream. We're able to recognize ourselves as ourselves when we stagnate, so to speak. Dogen calls it hindering. When we flow back in the opposite direction, when we work against the impermanence that characterizes all conditioned things. And this isn't necessarily bad, since this is how we're able to awaken to the truth of our experience. Our routines, our assumptions, our preferences, these are all little eddies in the current, like little whirlpools that flow against the current of the world that we suppose work against or help impose structure on the flow of time, the flow of ourselves. When we go somewhere new, when we're in an unfamiliar environment, that's beginner's mind. Um, that's when we're flowing along with the stream and not against it, the stream that is us. We haven't formed hard karmic reactions to to this flow of new experiences, so we just take them at face value, and that's freedom right there. Freedom from dukkha, freedom from suffering. Now, don't let me fool you. It may sound like everything went 100% according to plan, but there were some major issues that I had to face while I was on the retreat, and the types of issues that I probably wouldn't have arisen anywhere else. Mainly to do with zazen, oddly enough. During the morning sit, when we get to the second 30-minute period, my legs started to hurt like really, really bad, and my mind began to wander in this like crazy feedback loop. Something I'd never really encountered. I'd never encountered such. I kept calling it confrontational zazen. I never encountered that before. If I'd been at home, I'd have just stood up and done some walking meditation or like repositioned myself. But there in the Zendo, you really had to face the discomfort. My legs and knees and my feet just started like aching. So now putting myself into this uncomfortable and like unexpected position is one of the reasons why I went to the farm in the first place, and I definitely found it there. It's sort of like this old Zen question that goes, what do you do if you suddenly find yourself at the bottom of 1,000-foot well? I guess you just sit. Now, this points to a very important idea that selves are pernicious. They have a habit of just popping up unannounced. Sokuzan down in Battle Creek likes to say that to not turn your practice into a credential. But I'm sitting there like, I'm Shinkyu and I've been practicing for a long time. These types of things don't happen to me. I can say that like all day long, and there I am at the bottom of that 10,000 or that 1,000-foot well, and everything just hurts. So, how did I get out of it? I just followed my own advice. I didn't run away from the pain. I didn't grasp onto it, and I didn't ignore it. Dogen often calls this to thorough study. He also writes in one of his more famous passages, so-called today flows into tomorrow. Today flows into yesterday. Yesterday flows into today. And today flows into today. And tomorrow flows into tomorrow. What I realized through the study of myself and my situation was that I'd brought so much of my past with me onto the cushion, like so many hopes and dreams that I'd pinned onto this experience of being at the Zen Center. My present flowed back into the past in my Zazen, and my present hopes flowed into the future. I put like so much weight and substance into something that's formless, just sitting, that I felt like I was drowning those first few days. I kind of paralyzed myself. Once I'd figured this out, once I'd looked at it and studied it long enough, once I'd seen the hidden emotional aspect of this experience that I've kind of buried beneath everything, I was able to move in and work on the physical aspect. So I got a second zabuton, a second meditation mat, and I stuck it on top of the other one, so 2 mats deep. And I got a few of these little thin black square pads that I stuck under my knees, and then I was able to sit finally in relative comfort, which was nice after the trial of the first week. So that's the rundown of what I've been up to for the last few weeks. and it's the reason why I haven't been around much lately. And I'm still not like 100% sure whether I'll end up in San Francisco for a few years or not, since there's been some other opportunities that have popped up in the meantime, that are still kind of in development. But it does seem like I'll be going somewhere for a while, probably starting this summer, but I'll keep everybody posted. Thank you for listening. And with that, we'll start a short period of meditation. And if your foot hurts, you can move it if you would like. You don't have to grin and bear it. So if you haven't ever sat meditation before, I'll give just the quickest little overview. Find a comfortable position. Look a couple feet in front of you. Just kind of let your senses free. If a thought comes into your mind, let it go. We talk about them like clouds, drifting into consciousness and going away from consciousness. All right. Well, before we started Joys and Concerns, I remembered an anecdote that was drifting in my mind while I was sitting zazen. I'm supposed to be focusing on things, but there's a monastery in Japan that was set up specifically for American and Japanese people to learn to meditate together. And one thing that the author noticed while he was there is that when Americans would learn to meditate, they would always try to focus on what their mind was doing, how to get in the proper mindset. Well, the Japanese are always trying to figure out how to sit properly in a perfect posture. I think he thought that the Japanese might have been a little bit closer to the mark, which is kind of the teaching of Zazen. Dogen hardly talks about the mind, like a little bit, always perfect posture, and then somehow everything comes together. Yes. So we will start with joys and concerns. I'll start by saying it's a joy to be back in Grand Rapids, back at the temple, back seeing all the familiar faces. So thank you for having me back. And if anybody else has anything? Nothing?
I have a joy. I'm going to be attending my first church service after this, first time in a while. Thanks. At the Fountain Street Church with my wife to celebrate International Women's Day, so I'm pretty excited about it. Thank you.
Nobody was concerned. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's good to have you back. I'm Maggie Sue. I'd like to rejoice in with today, online, virtually. So it's going to be really great to see them all and just connect with them again.
All right. So nobody was enjoyed or concerned about the snow? I was a little concerned last night shopping at 10 p.m. and seeing so much snow. It's also kind of nice. So we will take a moment to hold our joys and concerns. We have temple-related announcements for March. There's the Grand Rapids Buddhist Temple Board meeting. Sangha members are invited to observe. It takes place on Sunday, March 17th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the temple, or you can join via Google Meet online. There's an online meditation group that meets Wednesdays from 7 to 7:45 p.m. You can join via Zoom, and you may also contact Reverend Kunga for more information on that. There's the Thursday Dharma discussion group, which meets Thursdays from 9:30 to 11 a.m. Meets in the temple through December 21st. So please email Reverend Jingsu Ryan Duffield for more information. I can provide you with the email address if you would like. There's a spring silent retreat happening on Saturday, April 27th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the temple. There'll be more info in the newsletter, or you can contact Reverend Kunga for more information. And if you weren't at the last one, the winter retreat, it was very cool. A lot of different types of meditation. Guided meditations, Lojong, Soto style services, potluck in the middle, which is nice. So I highly recommend it if you can make it. And it's a lot easier to sit. I know it sounds like a lot of time, but somehow it just breezes by. Buddhist-based recovery meetings, Mondays, 6:30 p.m., meditation, 7 p.m., meeting at the temple. Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. at the Alano Club, which is 1020 College Avenue Northeast, Grand Rapids. And Fridays, 10:05 a.m. for meditation, and 10:30 a.m. the meeting at the temple or via Zoom. And there's also, if there's going to be a weather notice, an event of severe weather, we will send an email alert and post on social media platforms. And you can subscribe to the newsletter at zengr.org to receive the email alerts. And we will stand for our closing gathas. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'd like to talk about generosity, or dana, which is central to our Buddhist practice. And I'm thankful for our teachers who are so generous with their time, and also everyone that comes on Sundays is generous with our time as well. If you'd like to participate financially and to the temple to keep everything going every month, we have dana boxes at each end where you can leave cash or a check. There's also a QR code on the boxes that would take you to PayPal. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a drop-down menu that will also take you to PayPal, and on our website, zengr.org, there's also a link to PayPal. Thank you for your generosity.
Okay. Now I'll ask everybody to stand for our closing verses, which you'll find on page 9.
For all unskillful actions ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born in my body, mouth, and thoughts, and now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddhist teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without number I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha I vow to attain.
That's it. Thank you, everybody. We'll have tea downstairs. Discussion and just relax. You're welcome. Thank you.